everybody. Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. I'm Melinda Emerson, Small Biz Lady, your host. And now it is time for us to check in with our online folks. Hopefully you are watching us on my Small Biz Lady YouTube channel or my Small Biz Lady Facebook page. And if you are, we want you to subscribe. We want you to share this feed. But also, if you hear something brilliant, please leave us a comment. Or if there's a topic you want us to tackle in the future, you can put that in the comments as well. We always appreciate you because we do this service for you. Now it's time for me to introduce my guest, Alicia Miller. And she is the author of this brand new book called Big Money in Franchising. And I can't wait to talk to her. She is the director of the Emergent, the managing director of the Emergent Growth Advisor. She helps new franchise brands launch strong from the start. She also works with mid-stage brands seeking private capital so that they can accelerate their enterprise growth. And you have to check out her new book anywhere books are sold. Alicia, welcome to the Small Biz Chat podcast.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
All right, so let's jump in. Tell me, how in the world did you learn so much about franchising?
Well, I started as a multi-unit franchisee myself. I left corporate America and wanted to run my own business. And I think that's a lot of people come into franchising that way as they start as a franchisee. When I grew that business and sold it and transitioned into more consulting work, and that's when I started work with founders who had started their brand and were looking to grow. And sometimes they were looking for capital partners as well.
All right. I actually know your story, so I'm going to back you up. I want you to tell us what you bought and what you did and what time frame under which you did it, because it really knocked my socks off when I first heard the story about you.
So I came into a tutoring franchise called Sylvan Learning, and this was a business that was in distress. These were 11 units that were owned by an owner that had overextended himself, basically. And I took those over and turned them around, worked with the team to build it back up. And then in about 5 years, sold it off. So I love the tutoring business. I love child services. I loved working with families, but I was in it to turn the business around. I saw that, it just needed some TLC and some extra capital to get it back on its feet. And that's what I did. It's a great brand. And that brand actually was just recently sold to a private equity-backed platform. So it continues to grow and do well.
All right. So most people do not start out in franchising by buying 11 units. I'm thinking that's like rare for people.
That's true.
I want to give you your flowers in person. Okay. So I'm like, listen, you bought 11 franchises and then you grew them exponentially to the point where you were able to sell them in 5 years for a mega profit. Listen, yep. You are the consultant that I want. That's all I'm saying. All right. So let's jump in here. What factors should entrepreneurs consider when they're trying to determine whether or not their business would be good as a franchise?
Sure. Well, one signal is, has anybody asked you, is this a franchise? If your own customers like what you're doing enough that they say they can see themselves actually running this business, that's a good signal to listen to. If nobody's ever asked you that, I would question whether or not you've really created something that's getting customers excited, right? You've got to have sustainable customer demand. It's got to be profitable at the unit level. You've got to be, growing, and it's got to be unique enough in the marketplace that you're building a brand for yourself. I mean, look, there's lots of burger concepts, there's lots of ice cream concepts and cookie concepts and so on. There's got to be something unique about your brand that keeps customers coming back to you. We talked about that earlier, the brand building piece. So that's where you've got to start. But then also things to think about, once you become a franchisor, you are now running a franchise business. You are now running your restaurant. You're not running your cleaning, business or whatever it is it was. You're now in the business of franchising, and your entire role has transitioned to supporting your franchisees. You've got to be sure you actually really want to do that, because that's a very different job than running a bunch of restaurants, for example. So think about that. And then make sure you've really proven that the model works in different locations and that you've got training and support documented so that you can teach other people, because that's really what you become, train the trainer, right? You've got to teach other people to run this thing. And if you're in the business every day and it's only succeeding because you're way down in the weeds in the business, then that's probably not going to be so easily teachable. So you got to start there.
So what are the typical, like, if I want to start going through this process, like, what is the initial feasibility study? Like how do I kind of, okay, I want to do this. What do I do first?
Well, the first thing is you need to start working with advisors who do nothing but advise emerging brands on how to do this. You're winging it on your own is not going to be a good strategy. There are attorneys and consultants and salespeople who do nothing but work with emerging brands. So that's a good place to start. And there's lots of ways to find those people. We can talk about that a bit later. So after you think about, is your model something that can be franchised? The process is fairly straightforward. You need to document your training and support or get help to do that. You need to meet with a franchise-specific attorney. Don't just hire your uncle who does real estate. You need to find someone who does franchising as they're living to help you get it set up correctly. You need to put together your business plan of how you're going to grow this thing. Keep in mind, there's 4,000 active franchise brands. It's going to take you a while to grow to the point where you hit what's called royalty self-sufficiency. So that means the royalties you're collecting from franchisees cover your corporate expenses. Okay. So for most franchises, that's about 50 units. So you're going to be selling franchises for a while before you hit the point where you can pay that for all that corporate support. So you've got to be well capitalized. You're going to make sure that you've got enough money to keep this thing going while you're building the business. And then, once you have come up with your business plan, you've also got to come up with a sales and marketing plan. How are you going to reach prospective franchisees? What are you going to tell them about the business and why they could be successful in it? All of these things are steps in the process you need to go through before you ever start selling a single franchise license.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. So where do I go find these consultants and lawyers that I need?
Sure. First place to start is you need to get involved with the International Franchise Association. So franchise.org is the trade association for franchising. It's based in Washington, D.C. There are lots and lots of resources there, including a supplier list. So you can search by consultants and attorneys. You should go to expos and IFA events to start learning from people who have been in the business for a while. Franchising is a really big community and family, and people are very good about sharing what's worked and what hasn't. So don't try to learn this on your own. Go learn from other people who've been through it and get that shortcut, avoid making mistakes. And then Franchise Times is sort of the big publication that covers franchising. Every April, they've got an issue called Legal Eagles that does nothing but talk about attorneys that understand franchising. And you can go online and you can see which attorneys work on the franchisor side, which work on the franchisee side, and you can see what their specialties are, such as working with emerging franchise brands. Those are good places to start.
All right. So I have to ask you this. How expensive is this whole process? Like, I just heard you say, I got to sell 50 of these things before my resources will pay, before my profits will pay for all the back end support I'm going to have to support these new franchisees. But how much money do I need to have up front to invest in this concept to, just to even hire the initial consultants that you're talking about?
Sure. So it's probably going to cost you around $100,000 to $150,000 just to get the basic documentation in place. So that's the franchise disclosure document that your attorney will help you draft, and your basic operating manual and training manual. You're going to need to hire help to get those done, as well as potentially hiring some support. So you're not, of course, doing everything yourself. Now, so there's two things to consider. First is you've got to have enough capital also for yourself so you can pay your own rent and your mortgage and your car and whatever you're doing personally. You've got to have that money set aside. You can raise money from family and friends, for example, or go potentially get an SBA loan to get this thing launched. But you will be much better off if you make sure you've got at least a few corporate units running, right? So you've got this concept, let's say it's a restaurant or let's say it's a cleaning business, don't rush to start selling franchises based on one unit. Okay, you'll be much better off and it'll be a much healthier start if you have a few corporate units because you're going to need the cash flow. Plus, it helps validate the model to make sure, when new franchisees are coming into the system, they can look and say, okay, well, here's what the corporate units are doing. If you only got one unit, that's not as credible as if you had five. So that's where I would recommend starting is before you launch your franchise business, add another corporate unit, maybe add two more corporate units. Then you'll have some cash flow. You buy yourself some time. You can afford more staff because you're already going to have bench strength built from the team that you've got helping you run the corporate units. So you can borrow from those resources to help you get the rest of the business launched.
All right. Last question before we go to break. What are some of the common challenges and pitfalls that people face when they're getting started as a franchise?
Sure. Usually they move too fast. They're undercapitalized and they pick the wrong franchisees to begin with. And that's if the model works. If the model doesn't work, then another common problem is they haven't really tweaked the model enough to make it a successful model itself that other people can then adopt and be successful. But those first 5 or 10 franchisees will make or break your franchise. If you just let anybody in who's willing to sign the franchise license, you don't really know what kind of operator they're going to be. You need to really think about who can be successful in this type of business. Are we looking for somebody who's a salesperson? Are they an operations person? Either way, they need to be wired to sort of follow your system. But if being successful in that franchise requires you to be really great at sales and building a great sales team, customer-facing team, and you're an operations person that hates sales, okay, that's not the franchisee you want to recruit. So you've got to be really careful about who those first franchisees are because their success is what builds the rest of the system.
I appreciate that advice more than you know. You're watching the Small Biz Chat podcast, and we will be with more right back.
Hi, I'm Melinda Emerson, the Small Biz Lady, and I want to welcome you to SmallBizLadyAcademy.com, your go-to resource for women entrepreneurs. Whether you're just starting out or ready to grow, we've got everything you need to succeed. From expert interviews to live coaching sessions, our platform offers practical tools and strategies to help you build a profitable small business. Join our vibrant community of like-minded entrepreneurs today and take your business to new heights. Visit SmallBizLadyAcademy.com and start your journey.
Welcome back to the Small Biz Chat podcast. We're talking franchising with Alicia Miller, the author of the new book, Big Money in Franchising. All right, Alicia, I got to ask you, how do you figure out what your initial franchise fee should be?
That's actually fairly straightforward. You can have access to all sorts of other franchise disclosure documents. The state of Wisconsin, go to their franchise website. It's easy to find on Google. You can download any FDD that's up there and you can see what other people are charging for their fees. So pull, competitors in your space, see how they charge, how they structure their fees. But it's pretty straightforward. Most charge a 5 to 6% royalty. Some do a flat fee, but usually a percentage of revenue is what's charged. The average franchise fee up front is $30,000 to $60,000 for an average territory. And the average national marketing fee is about 1 to 3%. So you can start there as your baseline. But as you start to plan your business, you need to look at what your competitors are charging in that sector and how they arrange territories, right? What they charge, is it by population? Is it by something else? So that you can know kind of what prospective franchisees might be thinking about in other adjacent opportunities.
All right. And now once I get my community, let's say my first 5 to 10 franchisees, how do you foster a sense of community within your franchise network?
Yeah, it's really important. Those relationships, franchising is all about relationships. So this needs to be front and center for your management team all the time. It starts really at the top. Is this, are you building a collaborative community? Do you have a management team that involves franchisees in big decisions? Do you factor them into your thought process at all? You're setting the stage for what the collaboration looks like. You can't ask them to be collaborative if you're not even collaborating with them. So start there. Recruiting right in the first place is really helpful, right? So you want to bring in franchisees who are collaborative by nature, who like being part of a team, want to be part of a family, who openly share best practices. And then give them the tools so they can share. Everyone's busy and working on their business. Give them online resources, give them, workspaces where they can go online, host, monthly or weekly deep dives in particular parts of the business, do marketing one week and operations next week. Put together a franchise advisory council so that you have a mechanism to get that franchisee feedback on a regular basis, and then get them together in person at least once a year. It helps if you do regional meetings or small meetings, as well as kind of a larger meeting. Those relationships that you develop at conference can bridge the gap and can really help people solve some of their own problems. They'll openly share solutions without always coming back to the franchisor for a solution. And as you know, in franchising, some of the best ideas come from the field. So having, your ear to the ground and always talking to your franchisees, you'll get some great information from them.
Well, I think it's true. You can always get good ideas from the front line if you take the time to ask them. So I agree with that advice wholeheartedly. Last question for you. What is the best business advice? What is the best business advice that you have ever been given?
That's easy. Just never stop learning. This whole book that I wrote on private equity, I didn't start off in franchising thinking I would be looking at private equity, for goodness sake. But private equity has taken over franchising, has affected competition, and has really accelerated a lot of even emerging brands. I didn't know anything about it, but I studied it deeply and, worked out what was going on in the market. But I did that through networking and really studying the market. It's never too late to learn a new thing. People come into franchise often mid-career, and they've invested themselves very deeply in a corporate sort of a role or a very different role. And coming into a new thing like franchising is intimidating. Don't be intimidated. There are tools to get yourself up to speed. There's an entire community of franchise people to help you learn what franchising is and what good franchising is. And then within the brand that you choose, you've got the community within that brand as well. So you will, if you invest in always learning, you'll get up to speed and you can take yourself in a whole new direction.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here